classroom. I'm trying to imagine what would be the difference between what happens in a regular school and what would happen in a classroom where children are working with philosophy for children.
Well, in a regular school, the teacher has a work plan, a set of objectives for the day, lesson plans for the day. The teacher will make assignments to the children to learn certain things, study certain readings, and then the teacher will question the children to discover whether they have remembered what they read and can give back to the teacher what the teacher understands to be the correct answers. It's assumed, therefore, that in traditional education, the purpose of learning is to acquire knowledge, information, that is considered trustworthy and reliable. And the teacher is considered a major source of information, an authority on the matters that are studied in school. And the children are then graded on how well they do in telling the teacher what it is that she expects them to tell her. Now, in a philosophy for children approach, you have a very different mode of pedagogy. Even the seating arrangement is different. Instead of sitting in rows, so that some children are seated behind other children and children are seated behind them, and they all stare at the backs of each other's heads all through the day. The children are seated in a circle so that they can look at each other face to face. And the teacher is considered a facilitator of the discussion that is going to take place, not necessarily a source of authority. The teacher is an authority in the classroom here in terms of teaching methods, pedagogy. It's up to the teacher to decide what is necessary to encourage the inquiry to go further, what is interfering and blocking the inquiry and needs to be overcome. Teachers must often make some decisions to help the inquiry proceed. But by and large, it's the students themselves who engage in the discussion, who ask the questions, not the teacher. It's the students who ask the questions, and they ask them of one another. And they listen to each other's answers, and they try to help each other build on those answers, because these children are dealing with problems and trying to work out hypotheses for solving those problems, and they're trying to work collaboratively, not competitively, but collaboratively on the problems they're facing. Now, how did the problems get set? Well, I had mentioned before that there are novels in the program that the children read. And each day there are episodes from the novel which are taken up. The children read these episodes aloud, a paragraph at a time, so that they all can share in the reading, and they all possess the reading together and the meanings of the reading. They begin by making it a kind of intellectual property of their own. And then they are asked by the teacher what questions they have about the readings. And the teacher puts these questions on the board. And these questions form the agenda of the subsequent discussion, so that it's not the teacher's lesson plan that dictates the agenda, but the students' interests. And according to their interests, they will ask the questions that will be taken up and discussed. And the discussion then ensues based on the questions that the teacher asks, that the students ask, but based on other questions, follow-up questions that the students ask of one another. So they're learning to question, and they're learning to listen, they're learning to speak, they're learning to reason, they're learning to deliberate, they're learning to make judgments. All of these things happen in the discussion itself. In other words, we don't identify a set of cognitive skills and say to the children, these are the skills you need to think well. We engage the children in thinking well, and in the process they learn cognitive skills they need. So they learn it inconspicuously without having to pay attention to the mechanical process of learning the skills themselves. They just naturally pick it up. They naturally pick up good reasoning. And it's effortless. And it's a much more, I think, healthy way to learn than to isolate and alienate the skills, and then the children have the problem of asking themselves, when do I use these skills and when don't I? When do I apply them and when don't I? That makes the whole process of reasoning very artificial. Whereas if you just have the discussion of the concepts and the problems and just let it move where it wants to go, then it becomes a much more comfortable process.